Hello, I'm Dan Rogers, and today we are here with the great Chad Prather. Chad, welcome.
I need to get my mother on the phone so she can hear you say that.
Well, I hear you were stumbling around the White House a while back and just wondered what was going on up there. Is
Yeah,
the getting so out of control up there they're going to have a talent show to.
I'll tell you what, I don't know what they're doing. I've been up there twice in the last 8 weeks. And we went up there to the first time we were up there 2 months ago. We went up there to visit with Carolyn Levitt and as well as Vice President Vance, specifically talking around the talking points of the administration. They had a group of folks with a large following out there with the ability to reach some people, and they just want to sit around and talk about what their plans and what their purpose and their missions were. And so we had an opportunity not only to meet with them, but we met with Pam Bondi as well as Kash Patel and uh, uh, Attorney General, I'm sorry, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and a number of others. We just had a great time. President Trump visited with us as well. We had an opportunity to go and visit with him in the Oval Office, which was a pleasure and an honor. And it was a good visit. We gleaned a lot of information, got a lot of takeaways from that. And then I was up there the other day. They really are trying to reach out past the mainstream media and the legacy media and bring in some other voices, whether they be people with a large following or independent journalists or people that have the ability to reach. And so we were sort of celebrating the 100 days there. And this was last week. I was in there, and they allowed us to ask some questions there with the press secretary. So it was a great honor to do it. I always tell them, I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know why you guys keep bringing me in. Um, but it is an honor, and as long as they'll ask me to go, I'll go up there and do it. It's a pleasure to be there. So it's a wild time we're living in, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and I tell you what, it's a pleasure to see somebody with some competence now up there in the White House.
That's the truth.
Everybody you mentioned are just top flight people. That Carolyn Levitt is a phenom, isn't she?
She really is. And, she's the same age as my oldest daughter. And I have to remind myself of that every now and then. In my, my daughter, she's an awfully intelligent girl too. And I still think of her as being a baby. She's just a little kid. They're not, they're grown women and they're very competent. And she really handles the press in a phenomenal way, in the way that this, the beauty of this administration, to your point, is they do communicate. They really do communicate. They're not afraid of the press. They don't avoid the press. They take all the questions. They sit down. And one thing that Trump does that I admire is he sits down with opposition press. He's willing to go face to face with these people, and he enjoys that. It's amazing to me the things that energize and motivate this man, that would probably turn me into stressful shambles. I was with him in Mar-a-Lago when he was in the middle of the lawfare and the court cases and the indictments and all of the things, and he just went through it just as smooth as could be. I mean, I don't think the man's blood pressure ever gets higher than it should be. So I would be a nervous wreck, but he handles it with a cool demeanor. It's impressive.
Yeah, it's. I think it's because he knows he's right.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
It's not complicated.
It's really
So
not.
we just, of course, we're probably both farm boys, so we have a different perspective. If it's broke,
Right.
fix it. You know.
Isn't it interesting the way people relate to Trump that you wouldn't think ever would? My mother, I didn't understand Donald Trump. Like in 2015, I didn't understand the phenomenon that was Donald Trump. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't get it. I was a Ted Cruz guy. I always felt like Senator Cruz was the smartest guy in the room, right? I felt like he was the guy. And my mother was a huge Trump fan. And I said, Mom, coming from your background, a gospel pianist, and you're a huge supporter of this guy who's been a billionaire real estate mogul playboy all these years. And she said, no, you got to pay attention to him. And he did win me over. He really did win me over. But to see the people, the blue collar people across this country, the folks that ranchers, farmers, truckers, people that have their head under a hood of a car working, they
Yep.
love this guy. He relates to them in a way that just no one can. And I'll tell you, I had gone about 3 years without being in President Trump's presence, and I saw him again at an event. He walked right up to me, called me by name, stuck his hand out, and I was like, Joe Biden couldn't do that. Joe Biden can't remember his own name. So,
Mm.
the fact that he remembered my name and I'm nobody after 3 years of not seeing me and just walks right up like his old friends. I mean, it's just impressive to watch the man work.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because of his background. He owned a lot of real estate. He had to fix it. He had to maintain it, and he had to work with all different levels of people to get it done. And I think that gives you a different perspective on how
Mm,
people really are.
mm.
Most people don't get, you know.
That's
So,
true.
they're living in their cubicle in their little office or whatever, and they don't have to deal with all varied people across the spectrum all in a day's time, you know.
Yeah, that is true.
And so it gives you a different perspective. And I think we're very fortunate to have somebody like him that was willing to step up,
Mm.
right? But there are a lot of other Americans out there just like him. So
I
this,
agree.
you know, and
I agree.
he's also bringing together people of different political backgrounds. You got a lot of Democrats that support Trump. They
Well, I
just think
mean,
they're Democrat.
and historically, he was a Democrat, and
Yeah.
Elon Musk was certainly on the left. Bobby Kennedy, the same way. Tulsi Gabbard, and I think what's happening is I think that the modern GOP is probably getting, a little more centrist, a little more towards the middle, or at least it appears that way because the progressive left has just jumped off the cliff. I mean, they've gone so far off the wing of the plane that they're floating out there. It's like the historians used to say about humanism in the early 20th century. They said they had their feet firmly planted in midair, just as a philosophy. And so we've seen with the modern progressive left, their ideas don't work. They're so intangible in terms of these weird ideas that they have and these things that they push that their ideas don't work. And so what they did was they threw the borders open and tried to just create a whole different audience. And we see where that landed everybody. And so, it's so rare to the point we made a minute ago when Trump does, you said, he knows he's right. Common sense is such a foreign concept now that when you bring it out, people just scratch their heads and they think it's the most radical thing in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's tapping into the more populist nature
Sure.
of American, uh, whereas parties morph.
Mm,
And you still have a lot of what I call the neocons in the Republican Party, but they're in both.
right.
They're the big government, war, big military, stick your nose in everybody else's business type people. And I think they're gradually dying out. They're aging out, but they're still probably 30. But I always say the problem is that the voters are populists, but the politicians are neocons. And that's
Yeah, and I think that you are seeing a swing in the pendulum, right? I think the spring was wound up so tight, and it has been that these 80-20 issues that the left has pushed so hard have turned a lot of people off. And that pendulum is swinging back, and so it's an interesting trend because, like you said, parties morph and they do change. So you kind of wake up, it's sort of like a goose waking up in a new world every day, right? We're just always anxious to see what's going to happen next.
Mhm. But it depends on who gets involved in the party, right?
True.
So people can have a huge effect if they'll just show up. And what I'm trying to do is get people to, because I keep hearing people are waking up, but that's just the first thing. When you wake up, you got to get up and then you got to show up. And if
Yeah.
you show up at your county commissioners meetings, your school board meetings, your executive committee meetings for your party, just pick one. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, be involved locally.
Yeah, I try to encourage my audience. I say, I want to remind you that the president is not, regardless of who it is not coming to your house for dinner. They're not the people you're going to interact with on the daily basis. The essence of conservative values is first of all self-government is governing your individual life, and then your home and family, and then it's your neighborhood, your community, and so on and so forth. That's really where politics has to happen. I meet with people all the time, and they'll tell me they're either running for city council or they're running for school board. I mean, in my opinion, these, whether they're precinct chairs or whatever they may be, it's these roles I think are the most important ones. And you know, it's amazing to me, particularly in the state of Texas, how many people don't understand our primary system. They don't participate in the primary system. They don't pay attention to these things. They don't want to get active. They don't want to get involved, and then they scratch their head wondering what happened. And that's the nature of the thing, and the numbers prove it. People don't show up to the polls for those types of elections. They just don't come out.
Yeah, so they're abdicating their voice to somebody that they may not agree with.
Mm-hmm.
They do that. So it's so imperative that. So that's what I'm trying to do is convince people that they are important as individuals and that their vote matters, but they need to be informed. An informed voter, I have no fear of. I trust the voter, not necessarily the politicians.
Mm.
And what I'm trying to do is really working on getting rid of these electronic voting machines. That's my main focus. And I'm trying to point out that our ballots, why is our ballot upside down? Your point. Why isn't your school board, your city council, your county commissioners at the top of the ballot? The president should be at the bottom.
Mm.
He has the least effect on your daily life. So I want to start a movement in Texas just to get them to switch the ballot.
That's a great point.
Do that. That would go a long way.
It's a great point. I appreciate that perspective on that, because it's pretty profound when you think about, we hear about the down ballot, right? We talk about people vote down the ballot, or somebody is, like a Beto O'Rourke, right? A Beto O'Rourke, Robert Francis gets on the ballot and he might not win his election, but the down ballot, it's very effective. Right, because people go right down on that deal, and those people underneath him end up winning their elections on the local levels, right? And that's an unfortunate thing, but that is sort of the effect of having that type of person at the top.
Yeah, I think the local people ought to be at the top, and you work your way down to the bottom, and I think that would help a lot.
I agree. That's a great
It would
point.
be easy to do electronically. It's easy, and if we had paper, which I advocate for, because I believe we should have hand-marked, self-authenticated, tangible ballots that can be verified. Then there's no question about who won, and all these billions of dollars spent on the machines by counties across America would be saved.
Yeah.
It's just a waste of money.
It's a waste of money, and we need a radical change across the board. Obviously we need voter rolls that are cleaned up. I've advocated for somehow legally with the Secretary of State try to figure out a way that we could. I think in the state of Texas, we ought to figure out a way where everybody has to go re-register to vote. Our passports expire, our driver's license expires, everything expires except people stay on the voter rolls until they're 300 years old. We need to find out who's here, who's alive, who's a citizen, who should be voting, who shouldn't be voting, and we need to clean those rolls up. I mean, we need to take some drastic measures in regards to that. But then with the machines, it's a nightmare. Like you said, we're wasting money. The people don't trust them. There were a lot of people, one of the things that concerned me in the 2024 election after the results of 2020 is a lot of people just didn't want to vote because they didn't trust the institution anymore. They didn't believe their vote was being counted. And I think the fears were justified.
Yeah, I was trying to get our commissioners to get rid of them, and she's a Democrat, a local activist, a black lady up in what we call the Heights here.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked if she could join my group. I said, "Well, Mildred, you're a Democrat." She goes, "I know." I said, "But it'd be up to my precinct chairs. I don't have a problem with it. I think we're on the same page." I said, "We need to get somebody up there that can get those people to start voting." Right.
Mm.
She said, "Oh, well, that's not the reason they're not voting." I said, "Well, what's the reason?" And she said, "They're scared of technology. They will not use it. And they're not going to vote on the machines. Not going to happen."
Wow.
So there you are, disenfranchising a huge number of people because of the machines.
Mm.
And I think that happens to a lot of people, even people like us, They
Sure.
think they don't understand technology and they're afraid to go vote.
Mm.
So that to me tells me it's a bad system. So if you have a bad system, why don't we get rid of it and go to a system that works that people can have confidence in, right? It's about confidence in the elections. Because if people lose confidence in their elections, they lose confidence in their politicians, in their government, and that affects everything. And nobody thinks about it, but it's quiet, it's subtle. And then foreigners lose confidence in the United States because they think, well, we don't even know if they have legitimate elections.
Hmm.
That's a problem. Then they quit buying our bonds. Then your interest rates go up. All kinds of bad things happen. It's about confidence.
Yeah, and the confidence in most of our institutions is at an all-time low. I mean, no one, I think COVID and all of the craziness that went on with that exposed a lot in terms of our distrust of so many different things. I mean, every big institution out there we've sort of lost. And I've said over and over for years that you've got the media, you've got the educational system, you've got the courts, and I said we've lost two of the three, and now in many ways we might have lost all three, depending on which way the Supreme Court decides to do whatever it is they do at any given time. But this idea that our elections, I'm not sure that California's even finished counting their ballots from November. I mean, it's just ridiculous out there. The stuff is so interrupted by that giant blob of bureaucracy that's out there that nothing is efficient and certainly nothing's effective, and people have lost faith in all of it.
Well, bureaucracy is what is the problem.
Hmm.
That's the swamp. And it's a soft tyranny of the bureaucracy. That's the problem. And so you have to strip the bureaucracy down to its core and get rid of it. It's not easy to do. But I had to go help in a bond issue in Midland that they were going to do that was just stupid. We beat it, but we got help by the code enforcement. They got caught yanking the no signs out of people's yards.
Wow.
So we were able to make a big deal about that in the media and got people to calls and we got it defeated. But it's all this money going to these schools and colleges. It's not going to the kids and the teachers. It's to
Right.
build big buildings, which are benefiting the profiteers and the administration. And I was talking to somebody this morning. They said that in the past few years, after the last bond issue, they hired 80% more administrators. And they had 2% more kids and 2% more teachers, but 80% more administrators.
That's unreal.
Oh,
That is a big machine, and you look at the federal bureaucracy that we deal with in the Beltway, DC. I mean, millions upon millions of unelected bureaucrats making the decision and running everything, and here we are. It's trickling down. The people that are, the delegated authorities, the people that we put in office, they got a big system that's being run. I've said over and over, it's like a big blob that everything it touches, it just consumes. It produces nothing. And so, you look at the Doge stuff going on, this being exposed, how many buildings are just absolutely empty? These federal buildings, nobody goes in there. Nobody's working in there. I was at the Pentagon last Tuesday and there, at the offices of Pete Hegseth. And, we were up there in the offices and I'm walking around. I was like, man, this place is just bustling with people. Right. And, there was a time when it wasn't because, again, the COVID had shut everything down. But then you look at these other federal buildings and nobody's in them. I mean, they're mausoleums,
yeah.
and we're paying for that.
Yeah, they supposedly working from home, right?
Right.
You know how that works out.
I do. I do.
But well, I tell people it's the same thing. You're a business guy, I'm a business guy, and our elected officials are our employees.
Right.
So as citizens, if we're not there to oversee them and to watch them, they don't do anything. It's no different than any business that has employees and the boss is gone. What happens to that business?
Mm-hmm.
Weird things happen. So, but when the boss shows up, everybody gets to work and does their job, right? And bad things don't happen. So the problem is because people aren't participating locally, most of them are good people. They just don't know what to do, right?
Right.
So they're being sold by their school administrators a bill of goods or by their county judge or whoever. And it sounds good and a beautiful PowerPoint, dressed in fancy suits. with PhDs telling them what they should do, and there's nobody there to oversee. The bosses are gone. So that's the problem. But
Yeah, and it is
up.
a problem.
But all we got to do is show up, and we could transform Texas and the world and stop it.
You know, if you look at Texas, and I'm curious to hear, your perspective on this. You look at Texas, I always talk about our big cities being the blueberries and the chili, right? So we've got, Dallas and Fort Worth is always on the cusp of being blue at any given time. And then you got Austin. We know about Austin, and then Houston, San Antonio, El Paso. And these are blue places, right? And our cities are. I always contend we don't have red states anymore because we don't have any red cities. I think the saving grace for Texas is we have some large, small cities, right? And those are the ones that tend to consistently vote red. And I'm curious to hear your perspective of how the Panhandle is, Amarillo, Lubbock, up in that area. I'm down here in Montgomery County, Texas, so I'm in uh, pretty well red county here in Montgomery County. How's the Panhandle doing?
Well, because I inform the voters, we're solid red.
Yeah.
But I have a different perspective than what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe it's true. If the people are the same everywhere, the people in Houston are just as conservative as the people in Montgomery County, for the most part, right? But nobody's getting to them, and they're not voting. And they may be voting, but we don't know if the machines are correct.
True.
I saw this in 2020 with what happened in the election. I lived in Austin. I didn't know a liberal. Everybody I knew was conservative, right? They have businesses, they own homes, they go to church, they own vehicles. You have a few UT students that look weird. And there's a music scene there with some people that probably are too stoned to ever vote. But I don't really think it's liberal. I think it's a narrative created by the media that is not true. If you remember, they kept saying Texas is turning blue, but that went away. They quit saying it. It was to psych conservatives out so they wouldn't show up and vote, so they would think it wasn't worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I think that's happened in places like Austin a little bit. But I went to Austin right before the election in 2020 because I had to pick up 5,000 Trump signs because I was blowing them out in Oklahoma, all over West Texas. I was selling out of them faster than they could print them. I go to Travis County. There's Trump banners, signs everywhere. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Trump's going to win Travis County. But I didn't see any Biden signs, very few in Travis County. But when I looked at the results, it said 80% Democrat. How can that be? I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I don't believe the machines at all. I do not believe them.
No, I don't believe the machines at all, and it is one big psyop in terms of how they try to brainwash people with the media to do that. Because I've made that same argument, and I think one of the statistical things that you can point to is how large the Trump margin of victory was in 2024.
He won bigger in 2020 than 2024.
I mean, there's no way Joe Biden got 85 million. I mean, the guy was licking windows in the basement. He was dementia ridden. I mean, there was no way the guy. I mean, he would do quote rallies with 17 people in front of him. There was no way he got 85 million votes. There's no way he got more black votes than Barack Obama got in two different elections. There's no possible way.
Yeah, we've got some federal suits out there on these machines, and they know we were watching. We've got them on 9 different states. Actually, Pam Bondi took our exact language and used it on a lawsuit. And they say, well, that's a good sign that's a way that the attorney general gives you the thumbs up, right? If they use your language. But because we have these lawsuits filed and they knew we were watching, I don't think they messed with the presidential election in 2024. I'm not convinced they didn't mess with some of the down ballot races.
Right.
And particularly in other states. So to me, my concern is that the big thing about the machines has kind of died down and they're going to say Trump won, so there's nothing wrong with them.
Correct.
They're going to be back. Okay. So we have to do whatever it takes now to eliminate those machines and go back to a transparent election system. And your county commissioners in Montgomery County can make the choice to do it, but they don't have courage.
That's
We
true.
need to encourage them. So I'm working on an idea on how to encourage these commissioners to do the right thing. But somehow they're being rewarded to not do it. And I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, that's one I'd like to uncover myself. Because they are deeply entrenched here. I mean, they're embedded with those machines.
I'm
I
not
don't
so
trust.
sure it's not the Republicans behind the machines.
Right.
That's that's what I'm beginning to think. They're
That's
not giving us any help.
No, they're not.
All
And
of
that's one of those things where and I think I said it on a show this morning where if we could pull the string and really unravel the fabric, I think we would see some sacred cows get toppled over, some things that we would be shocked to know the truth about. And I think that very well could be one of those things. But you make a very valid point, Dan, but about these people forgetting that these machines are corrupt and the people behind them are corrupt.
Yes.
And it's a manipulation because you got Trump in. Well, I mean, this battle's not over. I mean, this battle is not over. And the fact that the left can throw a person who really is not smart, like Kamala Harris, up there, and that's going to be their candidate. And they're like, because again, to them, the fix is in, right? That's why Hillary Clinton destroyed her hotel room. She was so mad at losing in 2016 because the fix was in, the whole deal. She was supposed to be the president. And they tried to manipulate that election, but they didn't turn the algorithm up high enough. Well, they turned it up way too high in 2020 and exposed themselves for what they did. And that's why I encouraged everybody prior to the election, when they were saying, well, our vote's not going to count, I said, you got to overwhelm the algorithm. You got to make it, what's the phrase? Too big to rig is what they started saying. And I was saying that forever. You got to you got to turn that volume knob up past 10. I mean, it's got to get up to 11 or 12. Crank that thing up there. And I think that's what we did in 2020.
Yeah. But to me, we shouldn't have to do that.
Shouldn't have to do
Go
it.
back to hand marked, self authenticated, tangible.
Agreed.
It can be verified. Then we know. And we
Agreed.
have results. When I was an election judge when we had hand marked ballots, we had our election results way quicker than we do now.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little city election up here in Amarillo. 10,000 people voted. We didn't have our results till 9:30. It's supposed to be electronic. That's popping the thumb drives out, sticking them in a computer, and downloading it.
Right.
And you had maybe 10 polling places. That should be done in 15 minutes tops, right? Why is it taking that long unless they were doing something they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it appears. But we had our results statewide. Every county by 9 o'clock, we had all our results when we had paper. Why does it take so long with electronic? And that was the selling point of it, right? Oh, we need to get our results quicker.